Okay, everybody, today we are going to work on a different type of activity. So this week we're going to work with strings. Strings are one of the most handy classes in all Java, just because most of the things that we need to do is to manipulate different strings in order to concatenate or separate or split phrases into words and those words into characters. So what we're going to do is that we're going to develop all this tutorial, but you guys will learn today to create static methods within the main class. That way you guys can separate every program into static methods. Before, we used different methods from other classes in order to use the behavior of an object. In this case, when we create methods in the same class, what we're doing is that we can call those methods without creating an object or an instance of an object from a particular class. So we're going to do that today, and then we're going to call those methods from the main method, okay, or the main public static void main, okay. So we're going to call it string stats. It's important that you download this file first in order to get to work, and then see all the instructions. So the first thing we're going to do is that we're going to create a scanner object in order for a user to enter a phrase. In order to create a scanner object that is going to be visible across all the class, it is a very simple action. Instead of putting it inside the public static void, which the scope will be only for the public static void, we're going to create it over here, and we're going to call it private. Private means that it's going to be private for this class, but it's accessible from any part of the class. We're also going to call it static because otherwise that's the only way it can read from static methods. Now, as you can see, we have an error here. That error is because we haven't imported the util class, and we are going to use the reader. So you can see it is italic and in blue. It's just because this variable is going to be accessed from any instance of this class, okay? So we're going to be able to call the reader from any part of the class. So we created the scanner object so we can then initialize this object wherever we want. We can call it from here. We can initialize it from the main method where we say reader is equal to new scanner system.in. And this is something that we've done several times. And then now reader, as you can see, will be accessed from any situation. Now create a scanner object in order for users to enter a phrase that has at least 5 words. In this portion of the code, what we're going to do is that we're going to have other methods. Now, as you can see, we're going to trim a string. Now, the trimming of a string, instead of doing it right here on the public static void main, we're going to create a new method for this. And it's going to be a string method because it has to return a string. So every method that we create is going to be a string. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is that we're going to create a new method, and this is something new that I want to show you guys. And I'm going to write it over here. And remember, it has to be public static in order for you to access the different from the main. And we need to make a method that returns a string. So we're going to call it public static string, and we can't call it trim because trim, it is a method from the string class. We're going to call it trim s, okay? And for trim s, we need to send the whole phrase that we're using, okay? Or the whole string that we're using. And we're going to call it temp, which is the temp string that we're using, okay? Now, we can always create stud methods. A stud method means that we create all the methods and then we just leave them completely empty in order for the person or the people to fill it out. I'm just going to say return null just for now, just so it returns something and it doesn't give me this error. And the same, I'm going to do it with the same with each and every portion of it. Now I'm going to write here, it's going to be the trimming method for the class. Now, after this, it returns a string. Of course, if I go back to the public static void main, when I call this method from the public static void main, which I'm going to call it from here, I need to store it somewhere because it returns a string. So I need to say string trimmed. I can call it trimmed. And then if I call the method trim_s, okay, it requires a string, of course. So that's the one that you're going to use when the person inputs the values, okay? So when I say create a scanner object in order for a user to enter a phrase that has at least 5 words, here I am going to tell the person to enter a phrase with at least 5 words. Okay? After I do this, then the person is going to enter that phrase, and I am going to store it in my original string. And that's going to be the one that I'm going to work on. Okay? So string, original string, and this original string is going to be reader dot next line, and I'm going to store it at that position. Okay, so here I have my original string. Now, everything that the person wrote as the original phrase is going to be the original string. Then I can start calling the different methods. So let's say string trimmed, and here I'm going to have just a variable with the string trimmed, and I'm going to call the trim method where I need to trim everything using the trim method. So I say trim_s, and the trim_s method requires a string, which one? The original string. So I wanted to go and take this original string and do something inside the trim_s, and then return the string trimmed. Okay. Now we're going to do exactly the same with every single method. So I'm going to create a new method that finds the index of the first space. Okay, so you can call it whatever you want. Then you're going to create another method called find the substring of 1/3 of the length, and so on and so forth. Now everything has to be using methods. Now these are static methods. They're used in the same class. But it's really interesting because at the end you're going to see only a public static void main and a bunch of sub-programs or sub-functions or methods, okay, that make the code a lot more organized and easy to understand. So from now on, we're going to try to use methods as much as possible, okay? Now this is within the same class, but you guys already use methods and created object instances from other classes. Okay, so good luck with that. If you have any questions, leave a comment or send me an email. That way I can help you out.